first came across each other through the Bridport Prize, which every year it started off as a short story, then it had poetry, and I believe you've been longlisted or something with poetry. Is that right? If I'm right, have I got?
I was longlisted for the Bridport, or shortlisted, whatever it is.
Yeah. So, but we were both in the same year. We were both longlisted for our novels, and so what happens when you run a competition is like that? It's one, it's nice for your ego, but also you end up having a bit of a conversation with other people. So that's how Ali and I first met. And then Ali was very kind and has been very supportive of my writing, and has taken a bit longer than I did to get published. And so I'm really delighted that Ali has been published by One Scheme of Happiness, which has been published by a very small press called Retreat West. And Amanda Sate, who is Ali's editor, and I also know through her work at Retreat West, is one of those wonderful writing people who supports other people's writing really well. And she's really a good champion of really interesting writers. So yeah, so that's how I kind of know Ali through that. And then I discovered more recently we had an even closer connection because my sister Joanna and Ali know each other through their poetry. I think, is it the Pitsanger Poets?
Well, no, it's through the poetry school, really.
It's through poetry schools, but they have known each other for a long time. And also Ali knows my brother-in-law Meredith, who's also written a novel. So there's lots and lots of connections we have, and it was just really funny to discover somebody I'd never actually met in real life until recently. You know, has loads of connections in my life. So I'm very pleased to welcome Ali here today. One Scheme of Happiness is a really interesting, very dark tale of relationships from childhood when you meet people again in adulthood. And I found it really absorbing. It's very atmospheric. My review is still coming on Amazon, but it's a very interesting exploration of obsession from childhood into adulthood and how we change as grown-ups as well. And actually, there's a lot about deception and what we think is true in relationships. So I won't say any more about that. I will hand you over to Ali. I'm going to go on mute. If I disappear, it's just because I'm doing a bit of planning. So my screen might go down, but I will still be listening. And I have turned. What time? We've got till 5:02, but it might go a little bit because we're a little bit late starting to see how it goes. I've switched on chat in the side, so if anybody's got any questions, it's up to you, Ali. You can say how you'd like to run the session, but if anyone's got questions, if you put them in the chat, can you see the chat at the side? If I write a question,
no,
I'm saying write a question here, and I'm sending it to everybody. And can everybody?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So
I see.
So if you, on your chat, if you just have a question for Ali, if you put it there, then Ali can look from time to time and she can answer those as you go along. That's enough for me. Over to you, Ali. Thank you very much.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Let me just put it on. Now, I'll leave you on there. I can see you all. I was just going to talk about sort of how I got to publish the book and then go on to talk about the book itself a little bit and then read a bit and then questions and answers after that, if that fits in with everybody. So I was going to talk about how I actually managed to get this book published, because I think I started writing it probably, I don't know, over 10 years ago, so a long time ago. And I was kind of writing it and thinking, I've got a good story here, I know what I'm doing. But then I realised when I read it back, I thought, this is what I want to write, but it's not really a proper story. You know, I know what novels should be like. You know, when you read a novel, it should have a beginning and a middle and an end and all that sort of thing. So I just happened to see something on the Arts Council website. It was a course at City University. So I went along to that open evening, and they were talking about what they were going to do. And they support you for a whole year, and you attend night classes for 2 nights a week. And they cover all the sort of basics. It's a bit like doing, not like a master's, but sort of slightly lower than a master's level. And so that was great. I enrolled on that, and have met lots of people through it. So I've still got a sort of really supportive writers group. And we also had links with publishing and agents and that sort of thing. So they showed you how to write letters to publishers and agents. And yes, I think probably the best thing from doing a long course like that is having a supportive writers group. I think that's the best thing. We still meet now, and we even on Zoom we have sort of meetings which helps. Well, it's not obviously not the same. Yes, and then I worked on the novel after that course was finished, and I'm not sure how long it took me after that, but that was probably 2013. And by 2015, I was sending out my work to try and get an agent, and eventually got an agent, Emily Sweet Associates, and that was 2015, which was wonderful because she finally read the novel and understood it and got it, and suggested loads and loads of edits and rewriting, and that took another several months, and so she started sending it out after that. And I'm trying to think, I was also at the same time, I thought, well, I've got to keep going. So as Virginia was saying, you know, we get sort of rejections, and so I kept on writing. So I started writing another novel, which was a completely different setting. And eventually it was 2018 by the time I heard from Retreat West, and they said Amanda Saint wanted to publish the novel. So, and that was a long lead in, so it was a year and a half until that was finally published this February just gone. So that was brilliant, just before lockdown. So had my launch party, and that was great. So that's kind of how it all happened, really. And yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the book itself. So you've probably seen it. There it is. One Skein of Happiness. Oh, why is it backwards in mine? That's weird. So it's set in a place where I used to live when I was a child. We moved around the country quite a lot. My dad was a teacher and became a head teacher, and we lived for a while in the Yorkshire coast in a really small place called Withensea. So I was there from the age of about 6 till about nearly 10, I think. And it was I don't know how many of you might have read the book. Some of you have. So it's based on my memory of that. Oh, thank you, Helen. Said it looks good. Can you all see the questions as well? Yes. Okay. Yes, and so the lighthouse in Withensea is actually built in the town because there's a lot of coastal erosion there, so the coast's always being washed away, so they couldn't have a lighthouse actually in the sea, although it would have gone. There was nothing to build it on, I guess. So I've set it there because it's kind of has lots of memories, and I haven't been back for 50 years, so I don't really remember it, but it's a sort of a child's memory. So I set it there because I wanted it to be isolated and a bit, I suppose, atmospheric. It's an interesting place, and I remember being by the sea and loving it. Well, being scared of it actually as well. I was very scared of the sea for a long time, but then eventually I did love it. So I've set it, the main character, Helen, has lived in this small place all her life, and she's just got into her early 40s, and she's looked after her mother. Her mother has mental health problems, and I think she's kind of agoraphobic and anxious. I mean, I was going to say I've suffered from that. I haven't suffered from agoraphobia, but I've definitely suffered from anxiety and depression. So I sort of tapped into my own feelings when I was describing the mother. And in the novel, she dies at the beginning, and so Helen inherits her house, and she decides, well, a lot of people would decide to go away and have an exciting life, but she decides, no, I'm going to stay here, do the house up, and just carry on, because she's very cautious. But then old friends come back to the town, and she's had a complicated relationship with Vicky, who was her best friend, but quite a controlling best friend who wanted to organise her life and was quite a bully. And then there's Sam, who's Vicky's husband, and he was friends with Helen as well. But then Vicky basically took him away when they became teenagers, and that was the end of their friendship. And they had a spectacular falling out as well, Vicky and Helen, because of the bullying. So when they come back to the town, Helen thinks, right, I'm going to start again now. And she gets kind of drawn back into their complicated relationship. She's also, which is kind of part of why I was interested in the story to start with, because she's had a sheltered life, she's read a lot of books, and she has this idea that she can create a life like the kind you might find in a novel, in a sort of 19th century novel, Jane Austen, and she looks at Mansfield Park, that's her favourite, and Fanny Price, who's quite a negative non-heroine, she's very passive, but she decides, right, if I just wait, I'm going to get the man I love. And so that's what she spends her time doing, but then it becomes more complicated because she becomes more devious, and she is quite deluded because she thinks that he will fall in love with her. So that's basically what the book's about, and it's whether she can achieve happiness through pursuing what she sees as the man of her dreams. Any questions about that so far, everybody? I will read a little bit. I'm going to read a bit from chapter 2. Can you hear me okay? Got this kind of silent wall of faces looking at me. So this is talking, I've just said this, yeah, it's the very first chapter, Mum dies, basically. Second chapter. For a long time, Vicky was my best friend. Together we were the best at everything. I was clever and good at reading. Vicky was good at dancing and acting. But then, one day, Mum took me to the optician because I was squinting. In the darkened room, the optician said, "Let's begin with a lion in the cage." I stared blindly into the machine, the cold plastic cupping my chin, waiting for the lion. Now, there's the lion and there's the cage. He's a bad lion, sometimes he escapes, so you have to put him back in, move the lever until he's safely in the cage. I don't know if any of you have ever done that when you go and have an eye test. If your eyes don't work together very well, which mine are, Fiona's nodding, you have to have a little lever. You're looking through this big machine, you're trying to move the lever so you can get the image into one. So that's basically what she's doing. I did that for a lot as a child, putting lions in cages. No matter how hard I tried, the lion wouldn't stay in the cage. He always escaped, and the optician said I had a lazy eye. I had to wear an ugly patch of pink sticking plaster over my good eye. Otherwise, my bad eye would stop working, and I'd have a squint like Smelly Ann, who had crooked eyes and no friends. So, in the end, I became a specky four eyes, like Edward, who could only read words like cat and dog. Now I would never be perfect like Vicky, who always looked pretty with her shiny blonde hair and shiny shoes and her perfect eyes. Even at school, she was allowed to wear black patent leather shoes. Mine were brown lace-ups because they didn't get scratched, and you could clean them properly. Every Sunday I polished them until they looked like conkers just out of their shells, but they never looked like Vicky's. She once told me she had chocolate pudding every day. We had milk pudding or yogurt because it was better for our teeth. And her teeth were the whitest and brightest in the whole class. I never felt very shiny, so I tried to be good. When Miss shouted at Edward, who had nits as well as glasses, it made my tummy hurt. So I sat still and held my breath so she couldn't see me. I tried to be good, I did. But on the day of the school photograph, I put my glasses in their case and shut the lid with a sharp snapping noise, then pushed them into the secret space under the chest of drawers. At the front door, Mum said, "Helen, put your glasses on." "Michael was playing with them. Maybe he's lost them," I said. "I can't find them." Mum's face went pink. She'd already told Michael he was in her bad books and we were going to be late, so we left home without them. I'd never seen her bad book, or her good one. I imagined it was something like the page-a-day diary Dad gave me for my 7th birthday. She only talked about the bad one, but I was sure I was in the good one. At school, we got into height order and walked to the playground in single file. Vicky had been practicing her smile in the mirror at home, but it was so cold, even she had goose pimples on her arms as she beamed. Mine were blotchy and grey like the chicken we had on Sundays. Luckily, Smelly Ann was off because she was the same height as me. No one wanted to be next to her. No one could stand the smell. Big boys stood on the benches at the back, small children at the front, and we all looked at the photographer with his camera stuck on top of 3 skinny legs. Without my glasses, my eyes were aching, and the photographer kept splitting into 2. I couldn't tell which was the real one, so I hid my face behind Vicky. Then we were ready and had to say cheese. I tried to smile, but everything was fuzzy. Then the photographer came out from behind his camera and walked right up to me. "You're so squashed in there, pet, no one could see you. Let's try again, then everyone can see your pretty face." I had to squat on the dirty tarmac right at the front with the smallest children, but everyone could look at me. I concentrated so hard to make my eyes see only one photographer, but I couldn't smile as well. And when the flash came, even though I shut my eyes, all I could see were big yellowy red blobs floating around. My head hurt even more, and I couldn't stop crying, and all the girls were nice to me, apart from Vicky. I could see her bottom lip getting wobbly. She was cross because everyone was ignoring her. But Miss told me to get a tissue, so she didn't have time to make her tears come. The other girls hugged me, and someone slipped an orange sweet into my hand. As we walked home together, I put it in my mouth and let it dissolve slowly while Vicky sniffed and said, "Well, they're bad for your teeth, you know." When Mum found the glasses in the secret place, she shouted at Michael and gave him a big smack. And he cried so much he wet his trousers. But I could still taste the orange on my tongue for a long time, and Vicky couldn't. For once, I didn't have to share it with her. And even better, everyone liked me, and all the grown-ups said what a good girl I was. That photo was there when I cleared out the loft. Vicky was smiling in that special way she had, with her head tilted a little to the right. But I know her teeth are really full of fillings. There were a few others of me too, only one of Michael, in the sixth form, glowering at the camera. Mum used to laugh over each one and tell us stories. But when Michael left home, she never took the album out again. And a few days after Dad died, I found her ripping all the photos up, tears streaming down her face. When she saw me, she stopped and shouted at me, "I don't need reminders. I'm not about to forget what he looked like." All his photos went in the bin. Apart from the wedding photo, it was in a frame and it was too good to throw out, she said. It was always on the dresser. Widowed at 42. Poor Mum. To be honest, I thought she'd thrown this album out too. It was unnerving that so much of my childhood was still there in the loft, preserved and hidden from the light. "Waste not, want not," her voice whispered as I opened bags of old clothes and toys no child would ever play with again in this house. "Oh, neither use nor ornament," Dad would have said. The air was laden with soot from decades of coal fires. It was caught in the wooden joists and beams and settled on every surface. My red university gown hanging from a nail was grizzled with dust that drifted in, the thin sun coming through the skylight. A bitter reminder of a past that had been cut short. When I went back down, I had to scrub my hands with the brush and get the dirt out from under my nails. And my feet left black prints on the carpet, but for once, it could wait. I had so much time on my hands. For Mum, cleaning was as essential as breathing. When I was very young, Saturday was the day I tidied my bedroom. I put my ornaments in a row: a china rabbit, a teacup, a brass lady wearing a bonnet, and a crinoline. And she was a belle, so she didn't have any legs. There was a box for buttons and one for my pocket money. I had to dust everything and make sure my books were in alphabetical order, all my clothes put away. Then Mum said, "It's inspection time." Like being a soldier. If anything wasn't straight or was a speck of dust, she'd say, "It's not good enough, Helen. You know how to tidy your room. You're a big girl now." And I had to start all over again. That was just how things were in our house. If you wanted to get anywhere in life, you had to work hard. I always worked hard at pleasing everyone. Dad always went to his allotment on Saturdays. When he came home, bringing the scent of earth and outdoors, he said, "Good girl, Helen." And he patted my head and gave me my pocket money. After lunch, he took me to the library, just the two of us, and he helped me choose books. Not childish ones with pictures, ones by writers who lived a long time ago. Then for the rest of the weekend, I took every opportunity to read. If I wasn't reading, I told myself stories. I made up elaborate scenarios at night time or on car journeys. And I would have a clean house that nobody was allowed to make a mess in. And there were so many books, it'd be like living in a library. My favourite book was Mansfield Park, and Fanny Price was my heroine. She never complained. She wasn't stupid like her cousins. She was patient and good at waiting. And in the end, She married the man she loved. That became my plan. I would marry a man like Edmund, Fanny's cousin. He'd be kind, and he would never go away. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I don't know what time it is. I'm going very quickly, aren't I? Has anybody got any questions? That's about as far as I was going to go. The reading. Silence. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. On you go, Natasha.
So, sorry, it's 10:30. So if you have questions for Helen, if you could put them in the chat below, and Helen can ask. Helen, sorry, I was looking at Helen on my line. Ali, if you could ask Ali chat below, and we got up to sort of 20-25 minutes. So yeah, if you can put the questions in. So can you keep muted so people can, because it keeps the sound in other people's videos. Sometimes there's kind of feedback, so if you mute yourself and put the question in the chat. Thank you.
From Susan Young to everyone, did you always want to write?
Actually, I don't know how to do this thing.
Thank you, Susan. I don't know if I always wanted to write a novel. When I was a child, I used to write stories, and then I started writing after, I think it was when my youngest, when Martha went to school, and I just thought I'm going to have a go, and I started writing short stories, which didn't really go anywhere. And then one day, I think I was reading Carol Ann Duffy poem. She was a poet laureate then, and I suddenly thought, this is what I want to write. It was like these flashes of kind of intense emotion, but captured in a small form. They weren't really stories. So that's what I started writing, and that's how I met Virginia's sister Joanna through the poetry school, because and also Fiona. I met Fiona through the poetry school. So I did that for quite a long time. I still do write poems, but then this story kept coming into my head, this idea of this woman who has choice between reality and fantasy world, and she goes into her fantasy world and it doesn't work out. So I think, yes, but since then I've kind of mostly gone to fiction. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question whether I always wanted to write a novel. I think I've always written bits, and when I wasn't writing, when I had children, it was just so busy. But in my 20s, I did write. I used to keep a diary. I used to write every day, reams and reams and reams. And I did actually write a play, a really terrible play, which I found recently, because I think there was a BBC competition for, you could send a play if you're under 30, and I wrote this. Oh, I found it. It's really terrible. It's a ghost story. I mean, there's little bits in it, but it was after my father died, so it was all about some terrible loss kind of thing. Yes, so I'm not going to write a play again. Myself, thank you. I hope that's all right. And what was your question, Fiona? It's disappeared now.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned that you started the novel quite a while ago, and then you went to City Lit, and then you did lots more work on it afterwards. So the years of work went into this novel, and I wondered what changed about it between the early drafts and the finished version that we've been reading.
Okay. Well, the title changed for one thing. It was called The Quiet Water Spy. For ages, that was the title, until I spoke to someone from a publishing company. He said, well, if it's got spy in the title, people will think it's a spy fiction, so you're getting the wrong kind of audience. So I had to change the title. And I also had the title Yellow Roses for a short time. So that was one thing that changed over time. Oh, and it changed quite a lot, because originally Helen lived in London, and she was single, and she was a bit of a Bridget Jones character. She used to drink a lot, and she had all these married friends, and she fell in love with them, which is kind of what happens in the story, but it was much more. Oh, I think, and she did go back to the place after her mother died, so there was that. But someone suggested that she should be in one place. You can't have everybody going back to the same town. It would be a bit ridiculous and coincidental. So that changed, and different characters as well. So let me think. There's a small character called Julia. She was just mentioned once, I think, in the original novel. But my agent said, well, I think you need to get a bit of a more rounded picture of what Helen's like in different circumstances. So she goes to the choir, and you see her at work as well. So you see what her relationship is like with other people at work, and with she works in the office in a school, and you see what she's like with a younger worker there. And then I suppose the end changed as well, the ending, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen exactly. I thought I knew, because that was one thing when I did the long course at City University. They said, well, you should have an image of what the last image of the novel, what that should be. And I think I had an image of someone taking a book from a shelf. I can't remember what that was supposed to be, whether she was writing a diary or whether she was, I don't know. But yeah, I changed it several times. So it evolved and changed a lot, really. Yes.
Ali, there's more questions in the chat. So if I just mention them because there's quite a lot of them, so I'm keeping an eye on them. So the next question was from Helen, and is Mansfield Park your favourite Austen?
Is it my favourite Austen? I don't think it is really. No, it's not. I think I did actually identify with Fanny Price as a quiet person growing up. So there was a little bit of her in me, but I really love Pride and Prejudice. I love Elizabeth Bennet. And then I've read Emma recently, and I think that's an amazing book. But she's dreadful. But I think I did have a bit of a crush on Mr. Knightley, of all people. I wanted an older man to look after me, I think, when I was younger.
The next question is from me, and the descriptions of childhood and adolescence were really painful to read in this novel. Sometimes I just read it and I was just cringing, this poor child and the people about her. But then also, as you get on, you realise actually she's not so innocent in any of it as well. And it was a bit nastier than my own childhood, but I could identify with some of the experiences. So I just wondered, was there any of that drawn from life?
Not really. I mean, I remember there was a child that I remember my sister and I going up to this child and being really mean to her, but circling around her on our bikes and just being horrible to her. But that's as far as it got. I think we did it once, and then we thought, oh no, I don't want to do that again. So it wasn't really. But there is another one, again with my sister. There's an incident where Smelly Anne she falls into the boating pond. And my sister remembers that we did that to her, and she is still traumatized by it, she says. Well, I'm sure she's not really, but it wasn't hurt. She didn't break anything. She didn't break any limbs or anything. She was much smaller. I think you know what it's like with siblings. You don't necessarily want them playing with you all the time. Yes.
And we've got another question from Helen. So if anybody else is thinking about questions, just put them in the chat below and I'll read them out. I think the idea of toxic friendships is fascinating. I wonder whether everyone has a friendship like that. It's a bit like Elena Ferrante's My Brilliant Friend. Yes. I've only read the first one actually, but yes, I know what you mean exactly. And then someone else mentioned Cat's Eye to me. I think there's a lot of that kind of bullying going on. I don't think I've got a friend like that really. I hope I haven't. Like Helen, I used to have. There are various people. I mean, she's not taken from any one person. The only thing is the acting side. My cousin Tracy. I don't know if she's listening here. No, she isn't. She is an actor, and I suppose more dominant people. Maybe it's that sort of thing. But I don't know. I don't think I've ever had a friend who's really, really kind of manipulative like that. There was somebody, a bossy girl. What was she called? Bossy Anne or something. I can't remember. She was someone in my. When I was very, very small, he used to tell us what to do all the time. Yes. I don't think there's anybody. Thank you. So, are there any more questions for Ali? Sorry, I keep saying Helen. It's because Helen just keeps coming up on my timeline. Yeah. Do you want to put it in? You're muted, Fiona. So, can you put it in the chat?
Yeah, sorry, I'm halfway through writing it. I just haven't quite finished.
Okay,
so
that's fine. So you're writing it, that's fine. So put it down there.
Okay.
It hasn't. I can hear you typing now. That's very exciting.
Yep, I'm typing. That's why I.
Oh, it might be easier if you just.
So,
Why didn't you just say
sorry. Sorry, it's because it takes several lines to write. Yeah, something I noticed when I read the book, was that we hear a lot about other people's appearance. So Helen describes, particularly Vicky, we see her a lot, but we don't really hear much about Helen's appearance at all. Partly because I suppose because the book's very much in her head. And people mention that she's pretty. And we hear stuff about what she feels about her self-image, but I don't think we hear that she has, I don't know, brown hair and brown eyes or whatever, do we? Or did I miss it? And I wondered if that was how you got to that way of writing it. I mean, I liked it. It was kind of interesting not to know that, not to see her from other people's perspective.
That's quite hard to do in a first-person novel, really. And it was something I was aware of, which is partly why I used that at the beginning, when she gets on the train, I don't know if you remember that, and someone else sees her. No, she's still writing in the first person then, isn't she? Oh no, I mean, that didn't work in that case. I remember having a scene where she was looking in a mirror and describing herself. But I was trying to convey it through other people's reactions to her. Because I think that's the main thing with writing in a first person. You can't actually, unless, well, she could be very vain and describe herself completely, couldn't she? You're right. Yes. So I don't know if anybody else found that, or they had an idea of her.
I had a question, and I'm just going to answer that. I'm just being offered a cup of tea. I think that's nice. Yeah. I did get a sense of her because there is one bit where I got the sense she was quite dowdy to start off with, and then as she got involved in this toxic relationship with the couple that she was friends with, she became more seductive, and there was a whole lots of things about, he kept telling his wife how seductive she was, and then Vicky kept saying how she was developed, and so I got the sense that she kind of did that sort of thing that sometimes people do when they've had a very oppressive mother, then they shed off the skin of the kind of dowdy daughter and become woman. So I certainly didn't get that impression going through the book. But my other question was, one of the things that was really interesting about this is that you start off with Helen crying, and you feel automatically really sympathetic because, you know, there's character crying, why is she crying, what's she upset about? And as the book goes on, I got less and less sympathetic towards her, because I think that she's such a deluded character, and her kind of understanding, her lack of self-awareness and her understanding of the world, and it was a very interesting trick to pull off, because it was sort of, I mean, you know, I was fascinated by her, but I stopped being like, you know, those tears you see at the beginning perhaps aren't quite as justified as you think they might be. So I just wondered, was she always like that? Is that how she evolved?
She was probably more harsh originally, actually. She used to be really horrible about people. I had to tone her down. The publisher didn't like the way I had her. She used to say all kinds of awful things about people. So yeah, I think yeah, I'm not sure. I suppose she did evolve. Yes. And I'm glad you were sympathetic to her at the beginning. But yeah, I wanted her to be very interesting, and I didn't really want her to be particularly likable. But it's difficult because I also wanted there to be the kind of mental health side of things, and I wanted people to feel that it was possible to become that person. But I don't know. Maybe that doesn't work.
No, I haven't done that. I think it did. I think it was she's a really interesting character. We've got a question from Fiona, and we've probably got time for one more. So Fiona's question is, how has writing poetry influenced your writing style, if you think it has at all? And Judy said she is entirely believable.
Oh, thank you, Judith. And Fiona, I hope that it's poetry, and having gone to Mimi Calvati's classes and spending a lot of time writing poetry and looking and reading poetry and words, it makes me very, very conscious of what I write. And I was reading, when I was reading it, the book just before, and I thought, I've repeated that, that's ridiculous. And you become sort of hyper aware of things and try and make it sound, I wanted it to sound something you want to listen to. I don't like boring short sentences. I like interesting words, but it's hard because then when you're trying to do it in the voice of a child, you don't want to make it sound ridiculous as well and trivial, and puerile. But yes, I think I do look at things with a poet's hat on sometimes, definitely.
I've got a question to follow up on that then, actually, because when I was doing my writing course, I had to do a bit of poetry, and I found, like, as you know, my sister Joanna is a very fine poet, and I had to do poetry, and I absolutely hated it. It was really, really excruciatingly painful trying to distill an idea into such a small amount. And I love the expanse of the novel. So I just wondered, as a poet and an author, as a fiction writer, how do you kind of juggle between the two? And I'm impressed that you can, really.
I suppose yes, you do change. You're less kind of aware of the words in the same way as you would be in a poem, where every word has to count. And part of my reason actually for writing, which way around was it? Writing novels, because my poems are always very short. I can't really write much more than a sonnet length. So I was really hoping that once I'd done a novel, this is not the only reason for writing a novel, was to go back to poems and be able to write, really long narrative poems or long interesting poems, and I still can't. For me, a poem is still something that's really short and intense, I think. For me to write poems anyway, not obviously reading other people's is different.
Great. Are there any other questions from anybody before we begin to wrap up? I'm just going to go to full, in case anybody's waving at me, because I haven't got everybody on my screen. I'll just go to full screen. Oh, I've lost it. Yes. So wave at me if you would like to ask a question. Okay, then I think we are we're done. Well, thank you very much for that, Ali. That was just a really interesting reading. It's a really great book. If you haven't read it, do read it. And one of the things I would also say is, again, Retreat West is a very small publisher, and small publishers are really struggling. So any support you can give to Retreat West and this particular book, but to Retreat West would be great. The other thing that Retreat West is for any writers is they're really supportive writers, run a lot of competitions, and in fact, one of the reasons I love Retreat West so much is that when I was just about to give up on my writing, they shortlisted one of my books, The Wave, for their opening chapter competition. And I honestly was just so beside myself to have somebody notice my writing. It was wonderful. So I think Amanda Sennett, who's Ali's editor, is great champion of writing and women's writing in particular. So do go and check them out. And the other thing to say is the other people who are struggling in lockdown are bookshops. So if you look at the Authors Discover Twitter feed, I have shared a lot of my favourite bookshops. So please do share that on Twitter, and do also follow Indie Books UK on Twitter, who have a link to all the bookshops who are doing online ordering at the moment, because the dreaded company that we all have to kind of have a relationship with are not actually selling a lot of books at the moment. So this is an opportunity really for us to show independent bookshops we love them, and keep them alive, and hopefully we'll have recalibrated the market when we get out of lockdown. So thank you everybody for your time. I have put in the chat sorry,
I was just saying thank you to everybody as well. It's been great. Yes, you know, I can just see you.
Great to see so many people. I have put in the chat the next session if anybody's keen to come to that, and after that we'll be coming back at 1:15, so have a look at the website for any other events. But thank you for your time, and thank you for coming, and it's great. And thank you, Ali. A big round of applause, Ali. And sorry about the technical stuff at the beginning. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Natasha, as well. I can see Natasha.
Right. I'm just going to end the meeting now. Bye bye everybody. Thank you.